Kari Lake, the Republican candidate for governor of Arizona, appeared to joke about the attack on Paul Pelosi at a campaign event yesterday. She was asked about how she'd handle safety at schools during a campaign event. Here's what she said.
It is not impossible to protect our kids at school. They act like it is. Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection. But
Lake hasn't addressed these comments yet. It is striking, Emery, to hear not just somebody running for statewide office, but the laughter that you hear.
That's what I was thinking.
The audience.
Everyone else sort of encouraging that sort of a comment.
Right. Because if people booed, then she wouldn't use that again on the campaign trail. But she got the reaction that she was hoping. It reminds me again of going back to when former President Obama was candidate Obama, and people were joking about his birth certificate and whether or not he was a Muslim. And, you had people, it wasn't until Senator John McCain grabbed the microphone from one person who had bought into some of this misinformation and set the record straight.
Because
we don't see that now.
Sometimes the joke evolves, right?
Exactly.
Into not so funny. So we are 1 week away from Election Day.
We are.
And the attack on Paul Pelosi is certainly raising concerns about political violence. That's what we were just talking about. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett is here to talk about this right here in Studio 57.
I was going to actually, Major was sitting here as you and I were talking, and I actually wanted to turn to Major because you've covered all of the recent presidential candidates, but you recall those moments during the early Obama campaign stops, and then we've seen it ever since. Into 2022, the rhetoric has ratcheted up every year.
Right. So within Republican Party circles, there is now an expectation of harshness. Harshness is a calling card for your seriousness. So Kari Lake makes a joke about the protective cordon around, or lack thereof, around Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco home. That's a harsh joke meant to say to those Republican supporters of her, I'm not going to be cowed by this moment. I'm not going to do something that is sensitive or that gives any space to show sympathy to Paul Pelosi. Because if I do that, by extension, I'm giving sympathy to Nancy Pelosi. And I will not do that because you don't want me to do that. Your expectations are in this room. I feel your expectations, and I'm going to meet your expectations with a coarse joke about this situation. That is reinforcing her relationship to that expectant Republican electorate.
And by doing that, this notion that Republicans, they'd rather own the libs, they'd rather have the lamestream media arching their eyebrows
and watch
about
this conversation and say, oh my gosh, isn't it terrible what Kari Lake said? That entire process reinforces, you see, we did it. They're reacting to us. We're in control. We're driving the atmospheric narrative. And there's plenty of conversation in the aftermath of this terrible, terrible attack. And let's just remind ourselves, Nancy Pelosi, according to our governmental structure, is third in line. And this could be reviewed or viewed as an assassination attempt. Breaking her kneecaps would be disabling her, but it could have killed her. So that's an assassination attempt, possibly, on third in the line of the succession to the presidency. That's a very big deal. And yet, almost instantly, it became not only a source of conspiracy theories, but kind of, oh, whatever.
Right.
It's not an oh, whatever moment. And the Republican reaction, well, what about the veiled rhetorical threats to Brett Kavanaugh on the steps of the Supreme Court, or people protesting? Yes, that's true. That's a fact. Those things happened. But is the answer to that either coarseness or insensitivity or creating more space for it? I would argue it isn't. But right now, we don't have an atmosphere that rewards political leaders for saying, no, it stops now.
Right.
And we are pushing back against this. Instead, we have this expectation in the audience, and Kari Lake knows it very well, to play to it.
So here we have this, as what you're describing, a disturbing campaign strategy that has consequences. There are other things that we have heard that could be a campaign strategy, or maybe some of these candidates believe it. Kari Lake is one of them, right? She's an election denier. The Secretary of State nominee, Republican Secretary of State nominee in Arizona, is also an election denier. Secretary of State, I'm not sure if in Arizona, but in many states, is responsible for the elections.
Correct.
This is concerning.
So, a threshold question, and David Becker and I addressed this in our book, The Big Truth. So, a Secretary of State cannot change an election result. Very, very difficult. A Secretary of State, however, can create an atmosphere where local election officials don't have enough financial resources. There's not enough communication with voters. And can say things and leave inferences out there that leave doubt about election results. All of those things are possible. And if you're an election denier and you're Secretary of State, you can do all of those things. Can a Secretary of State say, oh, here's a batch of votes. Oh, and this candidate won? No, I'm going to make sure this candidate is the winner. Very difficult for one reason, among many others. The suddenly losing candidate has legal rights and can go to court and produce evidence. And they're not just going to lay down and say, oh, well, the denier Secretary of State said I lost. I guess I lost. I'm going to give in. That's not going to happen. But this is an issue. And what will be fascinating in Arizona is how do voters digest all of this? And do you really want to reward those who lie repeatedly about what happened in 2020?
But isn't this how democracy is sort of lost? It's chipped away bit by bit. It's death by a thousand cuts. It's not, I'm taking a box of ballots and throwing them out.
This is one of the ways in which democracies can eat themselves alive. And I would point out that for the better part of 50 years, and certainly through the entire Cold War period of our country, our adversaries tried to get us to hate on each other, and we never did.
Right.
We do so now without any or almost very little instigation from them.
Yeah,
to their delight.
You know, forget the assassinations of presidents in the modern era, President Kennedy, but assassination attempts on Gabby Giffords, on Steve Scalise, on Lee Zeldin, and now this with Nancy Pelosi. You mentioned Brett Kavanaugh. It really does strike me that we're in a place in this country where people and our lawmakers are unwilling to look at the hard truths, at the political rhetoric that they've unleashed in recent years and the ramifications that it has. You spoke to Governor Gavin Newsom about the state of politics in this country, Major. Let's play a bit of what he had to say.
This is something's different here. There's, the mind is being stretched. People feel free to shove again. I mean, there's some certain universal values, and once this election over, I just hope and pray that we can start to reconcile those differences, because this can't continue. It just can't.
So he says things can't continue, but
if
you need
works.
solutions it's one thing for politicians, and I hope things get better, but that's not how it happens, right? And
to that list that you just mentioned, Republicans and conservatives and Trump supporters would say there was a disproportionate media reaction. We didn't spend as much time, they would argue, on who was the person who shot Steve Scalise and what were their political motivations. We didn't spend as much time looking at liberals or activists on the left who do these sorts of things. That's one of the grievances they hold, and that's why this Kari Lake joke lands the way it does. So in that atmosphere where your first reaction is, what is my set of grievances? Not what is my larger goal for America? You have to turn to the political leaders who intensify that sense of alienation, because that's really an alienated idea. I'm not going to look at the fact that a crime was committed, in this case, Paul Pelosi, and say, no, well, that crime shouldn't have been committed, and full stop. No, first my list of grievances, then we'll talk about this thing.
Right.
And political leaders right now do reward their supporters for remembering and mining instantaneously their list of grievances before we get to whatever the issue is underlying that. And Gavin Newsom is trying to occupy a different space. Some will argue whether he is or isn't, but he's trying to occupy a different space. And he made a reference in that interview that I did with him about all the things that came into his inbox when he was running in the recall election. He said, I have not shared them with my family. I won't tell my wife. I won't tell my children. It's too scary.
Wow.
That's an atmosphere he's living in, and we have to ask ourselves, is this how America succeeds? I would argue it isn't. It's not how America succeeds. And everyone in the political arena, first and foremost, and those who follow them, ought to keep that in mind day to day. How do we succeed? How do we get better?
I mean, you do see, and I know we have to run, Major, but you're going to be here all week long until the election.
Yes, I will.
But, there maybe is a conversation to be had in the days ahead about, for example, Congressman Lee Zeldin, who's running for the governor of to be governor of New York here. Now, he's moderated his messaging because New York is a blue state. But before, when he was a congressman, he was lockstep with Donald Trump. He was one of those congressmen who was in lockstep with the president on the president's claims of election fraud and legitimacy. And now he's retooled that message. It makes me wonder, you know that was BS. Because now you're not really talking that much about it here in New York, where you're trying to fight for your political survival. But I know we got to run.
Yeah, that's why I call it a strategy with consequences.
And there's a very dangerous strategy when you deny elections, because don't think your opponents won't deny the next election. And when we deny all elections, the way we confer authority disappears.
That's right.
There you go.
Major, love having you here. We really do. We really do. It's been great.
Oh, you're just saying that.
No, we really
mean it from the bottom of our newsy hearts.
That's right. Major Garrett for us. Thank you, Major.